Welcome to a transformative journey with Buddhist Audio Bookshelf. Today, we embark on a profound exploration of the Vimalakirti Nirdesa Sutra, a revered text within Buddhist literature. This scripture, with its rich tapestry of teachings, offers invaluable insights into the nature of reality, wisdom, and the path to enlightenment. As we delve into this sacred text, we invite you to engage with us on a quest for spiritual understanding and growth. Whether you're a seasoned Buddhist practitioner or someone beginning your exploration of Buddhist philosophy, this audio presentation aims to make these teachings accessible to all. For your convenience, we have thoughtfully compiled a complete playlist of this enlightening journey in the video description. It's an open invitation to immerse yourself in the entire collection of teachings from the Vimalakirti Nirdesa Sutra. Join us on this path to enlightenment as we unravel the profound wisdom within the sutra's verses. Your participation in this spiritual odyssey is deeply valued. Subscribe, like, and share to expand the reach of these teachings, allowing more individuals to benefit from the timeless wisdom contained within the Vimalakirti Nirdesa Sutra. Let's get started, shall we? Vimalakirti Nirdesa Sutra. Translated by Robert A. F. Thurman, 1976. 1. Purification of the Buddha field. Reverence to all Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Aryasravakas, and Pratyekabuddhas, in the past, the present, and the future. Thus have I heard at one time. The Lord Buddha was in residence in the garden of Amrapali, in the city of Vaisali, attended by a great gathering. Of bhikshus there were 8,000, all saints. They were free from impurities and afflictions, and all had attained self-mastery. Their minds were entirely liberated by perfect knowledge. They were calm and dignified, like royal elephants. They had accomplished their work, done what they had to do, cast off their burdens, attained their goals, and totally destroyed the bonds of existence. They all had attained the utmost perfection of every form of mind control. Of bodhisattvas there were 32,000, great spiritual heroes who were universally acclaimed. They were dedicated through the penetrating activity of their great supraknowledges, and were sustained by the grace of the Buddha. Guardians of the city of Dharma, they upheld the true doctrine, and their great teachings resounded like the lion's roar throughout the 10 directions. Without having to be asked, they were the natural spiritual benefactors of all living beings. They maintained unbroken the succession of the 3 jewels, conquering devils and foes, and overwhelming all critics. Their mindfulness, intelligence, realization, meditation, incantation, and eloquence all were perfected. They had attained the intuitive tolerance of the ultimate incomprehensibility of all things. They turned the irreversible wheel of the Dharma. They were stamped with the insignia of signlessness. They were expert in knowing the spiritual faculties of all living beings. They were brave with the confidence that overawes all assemblies. They had gathered the great stores of merit and of wisdom, and their bodies, beautiful without ornaments, were adorned with all the auspicious signs and marks. They were exalted in fame and glory, like the lofty summit of Mount Sumeru. Their high resolve as hard as diamond, unbreakable in their faith in Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, they showered forth the rain of ambrosia that is released by the light rays of the jewel of the Dharma, which shines everywhere. Their voices were perfect in diction and resonance, and versatile in speaking all languages. They had penetrated the profound principle of relativity, and had destroyed the persistence of the instinctual mental habits underlying all convictions concerning finitude and infinitude. They spoke fearlessly, like lions, sounding the thunder of the magnificent teaching. Unequaled, they surpassed all measure. They were the best captains for the voyage of discovery of the treasures of the Dharma, the stores of merit and wisdom. They were expert in the way of the Dharma, which is straight, peaceful, subtle, gentle, hard to see, and difficult to realize. They were endowed with the wisdom that is able to understand the thoughts of living beings, as well as their comings and goings. They had been consecrated with the anointment of the peerless gnosis of the Buddha. With their high resolve, they approached the 10 powers, the 4 fearlessnesses, and the 18 special qualities of the Buddha. They had crossed the terrifying abyss of the bad migrations, and yet they assumed reincarnation voluntarily in all migrations for the sake of disciplining living beings. Great kings of medicine, understanding all the sicknesses of passions, they could apply the medicine of the Dharma appropriately. They were inexhaustible mines of limitless virtues, and they glorified innumerable Buddha fields with the splendor of these virtues. They conferred great benefit when seen, heard, or even approached. Were one to extol them for innumerable hundreds of thousands of myriads of eons, one still could not exhaust their mighty flood of virtues. These bodhisattvas were named Samadharsana, Asamadharsana, Samadhivakurvidaraja, Dharmasvara, Dharmaketu, Prabhaketu, Prabhavyuha, Ratnavyuha, Mahavyuha, Pradabhanakuta, Ratnakuta, Ratnapani, Ratnamadrahasta, Nityapralambahasta, Nityotksapthasta, Nityutapta, Nityamuditandriya, Pramaduraja, Devaraja, Pranithanapravesaprapta, Prasidapradasambitprapta, Gaganaganja, Ridnalkaparagrita, Ratnasura, Ratnapriya, Ridnasri, Indrahala, Jalinaprabha, Naralambanadhyana, Prajnakuta, Ratnadatta, Marapramardaka, Vidyudeva, Vikurvinaraja, Kutnimitasamadhikranta, Samhanadanitan, Gryugrapramardaraja, Gandahistan, Gundakunharanaga, Nityudyukta, Anaksiptidhara, Pramati, Sujata, Padmasragarbha, Padmavyuha, Avalokitesvara, Mahistamaprapta, Brahmahala, Ratnadandan, Marakramavajeta, Ksitrasamelamkara, Manaratnakatra, Suvarnakuta, Manakuta, Maitreya, Manjasugimaraputta, and so forth, with the remainder of the 32,000. There were also gathered there 10,000 Brahmas, at their head Brahma Sikhan, who had come from the Asoka universe with its 4 sectors to see, venerate, and serve the Buddha, and to hear the Dharma from his own mouth. There were 12,000 Sakras from various 4-sector universes. And there were other powerful gods. Brahmas, Sakras, Lokapalas, Devas, Nagas, Yaksas, Gandharvas, Asuras, Garudas, Kamnaras, and Maharagas. Finally, there was the fourfold community, consisting of bhikshus, bhikshunis, laymen, and laywomen. The Lord Buddha, thus surrounded and venerated by these multitudes of many hundreds of thousands of living beings, sat upon a majestic lion throne and began to teach the Dharma. Dominating all the multitudes, just as Sumeru, the king of mountains, looms high over the oceans, the Lord Buddha shone, radiated, and glittered as he sat upon his magnificent lion throne. Thereupon, the Lakavi Bodhisattva Ratnakara, with 500 Lakavi youths, each holding a precious parasol made of 7 different kinds of jewels, came forth from the city of Vesali, and presented himself at the grove of Amrapali. Each approached the Buddha, bowed at his feet, circumambulated him clockwise 7 times, laid down his precious parasol in offering, and withdrew to one side. As soon as all these precious parasols had been laid down, suddenly, by the miraculous power of the Lord, they were transformed into a single precious canopy so great that it formed a covering for this entire billion-world galaxy. The surface of the entire billion-world galaxy was reflected in the interior of the great precious canopy, where the total content of this galaxy could be seen. Limitless mansions of suns, moons, and stellar bodies, the realms of the Devas, Nagas, Yaksas, Gandharvas, Asuras, Garudas, Kamnaras, and Maharagas, as well as the realms of the 4 Maharajas, the king of mountains, Mount Sumeru, Mount Himadri, Mount Musalinda, Mount Mahamusalinda, Mount Gandamadana, Mount Ratnaparvata, Mount Kalaparvata, Mount Kakravata, Mount Mahakakravata, all the great oceans, rivers, bays, torrents, streams, brooks, and springs, finally, all the villages, suburbs, cities, capitals, provinces, and wildernesses. All this could be clearly seen by everyone. And the voices of all the Buddhas of the 10 directions could be heard proclaiming their teachings of the Dharma in all the worlds, the sounds reverberating in the space beneath the great precious canopy. At this vision of the magnificent miracle effected by the supernatural power of the Lord Buddha, the entire host was ecstatic, enraptured, astonished, delighted, satisfied, and filled with awe and pleasure. They all bowed down to the Tathagata, withdrew to one side with palms pressed together, and gazed upon him with fixed attention. The young Ratnakara knelt with his right knee on the ground, raised his hands, palms pressed together in salute of the Buddha, and praised him with the following hymn. Pure are your eyes, broad and beautiful, like the petals of a blue lotus. Pure is your thought, having discovered the supreme transcendence of all trances. Immeasurable is the ocean of your virtues, the accumulation of your good deeds. You affirm the path of peace. O great ascetic, obeisance to you. Leader, bull of men, we behold the revelation of your miracle. The superb and radiant fields of the Sugatas appear before us, and your extensive spiritual teachings that lead to immortality make themselves heard throughout the whole reach of space. Dharma King, you rule with the Dharma your supreme Dharma kingdom, and thereby bestow the treasures of the Dharma upon all living beings. Expert in the deep analysis of things, you teach their ultimate meaning. Sovereign Lord of Dharma, obeisance to you. All these things arise dependently from causes, yet they are neither existent nor non-existent. Therein is neither ego, nor experiencer, nor doer, yet no action, good or evil, loses its effects. Such is your teaching. O Sakyamuni, conquering the powerful host of Mara. You found peace, immortality, and the happiness of that supreme enlightenment, which is not realized by any among the heterodox, though they arrest their feeling, thought and mental processes. O wonderful King of Dharma! You turned the wheel of Dharma before men and gods, with its threefold revolution, its manifold aspects, its purity of nature, and its extreme peace, and thereby the three jewels were revealed. Those who are well disciplined by your precious Dharma are free of vain imaginings and always deeply peaceful. Supreme Doctor, you put an end to birth, decay, sickness, and death. Immeasurable ocean of virtue, obeisance to you. Like Mount Sumeru, you are unmoved by honor or scorn. You love moral beings and immoral beings equally. Poised in equanimity, your mind is like the sky. Who would not honor such a precious jewel of a being? Great sage, in all these multitudes gathered here, who look upon your countenance with heart sincere in faith, each being beholds the victor, as if just before him. This is a special quality of the Buddha. Although the Lord speaks with but one voice, those present perceive that same voice differently, and each understands in his own language according to his own needs. This is a special quality of the Buddha. From the leader's act of speaking in a single voice, some merely develop an instinct for the teaching, some gain realization, some find pacification of all their doubts. This is a special quality of the Buddha. Obeisance to you who command the force of leadership and the 10 powers. Obeisance to you who are dauntless, knowing no fear. Obeisance to you, leader of all living beings, who fully manifests the special qualities. Obeisance to you who have cut the bondage of all fetters. Obeisance to you who, having gone beyond, stand on firm ground. Obeisance to you who save the suffering beings. Obeisance to you who do not remain in the migrations. You associate with living beings by frequenting their migrations. Yet your mind is liberated from all migrations. Just as the lotus, born of mud, is not tainted thereby, so the lotus of the Buddha preserves the realization of voidness. You nullify all signs and all things everywhere. You are not subject to any wish for anything at all. The miraculous power of the Buddhas is inconceivable. I bow to you, who stand nowhere, like infinite space. Then, the young Ratnakara, having celebrated the Buddha with these verses, further addressed him. Lord, these 500 young Likavas are truly on their way to unexcelled, perfect enlightenment, and they have asked what is the Bodhisattva's purification of the Buddha field. Please, Lord, explain to them the Bodhisattva's purification of the Buddha field. Upon this request, the Buddha gave his approval to the young Ratnakara. Good, young man. Your question to the Tathagata about the purification of the Buddha field is indeed good. Therefore, young man, listen well and remember. I will explain to you the purification of the Buddha field of the Bodhisattvas. Very good, Lord, replied Ratnakara and the 500 young Likavas, and they set themselves to listen. The Buddha said, Noble sons, a Buddha field of bodhisattvas is a field of living beings. Why so? A bodhisattva embraces a Buddha field to the same extent that he causes the development of living beings. He embraces a Buddha field to the same extent that living beings become disciplined. He embraces a Buddha field to the same extent that, through entrance into a Buddha field, living beings are introduced to the Buddha gnosis. He embraces a Buddha field to the same extent that, through entrance into that Buddha field, living beings increase their holy spiritual faculties. Why so? Noble son, a Buddha field of bodhisattvas springs from the aims of living beings. For example, Ratnakara, should one wish to build an empty space, one might go ahead in spite of the fact that it is not possible to build or to adorn anything in empty space. In just the same way, should a bodhisattva, who knows full well that all things are like empty space, wish to build a Buddha field in order to develop living beings, he might go ahead, in spite of the fact that it is not possible to build or to adorn a Buddha field in empty space. Yet, Ratnakara, a bodhisattva's Buddha field is a field of positive thought. When he attains enlightenment, living beings free of hypocrisy and deceit will be born in his Buddha field. Noble son, a bodhisattva's Buddha field is a field of high resolve. When he attains enlightenment, living beings who have harvested the two stores and have planted the roots of virtue will be born in his Buddha field. A bodhisattva's Buddha field is a field of virtuous application. When he attains enlightenment, living beings who live by all virtuous principles will be born in his Buddha field. A bodhisattva's Buddha field is the magnificence of the conception of the spirit of enlightenment. When he attains enlightenment, living beings who are actually participating in the Mahayana will be born in his Buddha field. A bodhisattva's Buddha field is a field of generosity. When he attains enlightenment, living beings who give away all their possessions will be born in his Buddha field. A bodhisattva's Buddha field is a field of tolerance. When he attains enlightenment, living beings with the transcendences of tolerance, discipline, and the superior trance, hence beautiful with the 32 auspicious signs, will be born in his Buddha field. A bodhisattva's Buddha field is a field of meditation. When he attains enlightenment, living beings who are evenly balanced through mindfulness and awareness will be born in his Buddha field. A bodhisattva's Buddha field is a field of wisdom. When he attains enlightenment, living beings who are destined for the ultimate will be born in his Buddha field. A bodhisattva's Buddha field consists of the four immeasurables. When he attains enlightenment, living beings who live by love, compassion, joy, and impartiality will be born in his Buddha field. A bodhisattva's Buddha field consists of the four means of unification. When he attains enlightenment, living beings who are held together by all the liberations will be born in his Buddha field. A bodhisattva's Buddha field is skill in liberative technique. When he attains enlightenment, living beings skilled in all liberative techniques and activities will be born in his Buddha field. A bodhisattva's Buddha field consists of the 37 aids to enlightenment. Living beings who devote their efforts to the four foci of mindfulness, the four right efforts, the four bases of magical power, the 5 spiritual faculties, the 5 strengths, the 7 factors of enlightenment, and the 8 branches of the holy path, will be born in his Buddha field. A bodhisattva's Buddha field is his mind of total dedication. When he attains enlightenment, the ornaments of all virtues will appear in his Buddha field. A bodhisattva's Buddha field is the doctrine that eradicates the 8 adversities. When he attains enlightenment, the 3 bad migrations will cease, and there will be no such thing as the 8 adversities in his Buddha field. A bodhisattva's Buddha field consists of his personal observance of the basic precepts, and his restraint in blaming others for their transgressions. When he attains enlightenment, even the word crime will never be mentioned in his Buddha field. A bodhisattva's Buddha field is the purity of the path of the 10 virtues. When he attains enlightenment, living beings who are secure in long life, great in wealth, chaste in conduct, enhanced by true speech, soft-spoken, free of divisive intrigues and adroit in reconciling factions, enlightening in their conversations, free of envy, free of malice, and endowed with perfect views, will be born in his Buddha field. Thus, noble son, just as is the Bodhisattva's production of the spirit of enlightenment, so is his positive thought. And just as is his positive thought, so is his virtuous application. His virtuous application is tantamount to his high resolve is tantamount to his determination is tantamount to his practice is tantamount to his total dedication is tantamount to his liberative technique is tantamount to his development of living beings. And his development of living beings is tantamount to the purity of his Buddha field. The purity of his Buddha field reflects the purity of living beings. The purity of the living beings reflects the purity of his gnosis. The purity of his gnosis reflects the purity of his doctrine. The purity of his doctrine reflects the purity of his transcendental practice. And the purity of his transcendental practice reflects the purity of his own mind. Thereupon, magically influenced by the Buddha, the Venerable Sariputra had this thought. If the Buddha field is pure only to the extent that the mind of the Bodhisattva is pure, then, when Sakyamuni Buddha was engaged in the career of the Bodhisattva, his mind must have been impure. Otherwise, how could this Buddha field appear to be so impure? The Buddha, knowing telepathically the thought of Venerable Sariputra, said to him, "What do you think, Sariputra? Is it because the sun and moon are impure that those blind from birth do not see them?" Sariputra replied, "No, Lord. It is not so. The fault lies with those blind from birth, and not with the sun and moon." The Buddha declared, "In the same way, Sariputra, the fact that some living beings do not behold the splendid display of virtues of the Buddha field of the Tathagata is due to their own ignorance. It is not the fault of the Tathagata. Sariputra, the Buddha field of the Tathagata is pure, but you do not see it." Then the Brahma Sikhin said to the Venerable Sariputra, "Reverend Sariputra, do not say that the Buddha field of the Tathagata is impure. Reverend Sariputra, the Buddha field of the Tathagata is pure. I see the splendid expanse of the Buddha field of the Lord Sakyamuni as equal to the splendor of, for example, the abodes of the highest deities." Then the Venerable Sariputra said to the Brahma Sikhin, "As for me, O Brahma, I see this great earth, with its highs and lows, its thorns, its precipices, its peaks, and its abysses, as if it were entirely filled with ordure." Brahma Sikhin replied, "The fact that you see such a Buddha field as this as if it were so impure, Reverend Sariputra, is a sure sign that there are highs and lows in your mind, and that your positive thought in regard to the Buddha gnosis is not pure either. Reverend Sariputra, those whose minds are impartial toward all living beings and whose positive thoughts toward the Buddha gnosis are pure, see this Buddha field as perfectly pure." Thereupon the Lord touched the ground of this billion-world galactic universe with his big toe, and suddenly it was transformed into a huge mass of precious jewels, a magnificent array of many hundreds of thousands of clusters of precious gems, until it resembled the universe of the Tathagata Ratnavyuha, called Anantagunaratnavyuha. Everyone in the entire assembly was filled with wonder, each perceiving himself seated on a throne of jeweled lotuses. Then, the Buddha said to the Venerable Sariputra, "Sariputra, do you see this splendor of the virtues of the Buddha field?" Sariputra replied, "I see it, Lord. Here before me is a display of splendor such as I never before heard of or beheld." The Buddha said, "Sariputra, this Buddha field is always thus pure, but the Tathagata makes it appear to be spoiled by many faults, in order to bring about the maturity of the inferior living beings. For example, Sariputra, the gods of the Trayastrimsa heaven, all take their food from a single precious vessel, yet the nectar which nourishes each one differs according to the differences of the merits each has accumulated. Just so, Sariputra, living beings born in the same Buddha field, see the splendor of the virtues of the Buddha fields of the Buddhas, according to their own degrees of purity. When this splendor of the beauty of the virtues of the Buddha field shone forth, 84,000 beings conceived the spirit of unexcelled perfect enlightenment, and the 500 Lakavi youths who had accompanied the young Lakavi Ratnakara all attained a confirmative tolerance of ultimate birthlessness. Then, the Lord withdrew his miraculous power, and at once the Buddha field was restored to its usual appearance. Then, both men and gods who subscribe to the disciple vehicle thought, alas, all constructed things are impermanent. Thereby, 32,000 living beings purified their immaculate, undistorted Dharma eye, in regard to all things. The 8,000 bhikshus were liberated from their mental defilements, attaining the state of non-grasping. And the 84,000 living beings who were devoted to the grandeur of the Buddha field, having understood that all things are by nature but magical creations, all conceived in their own minds the spirit of unexcelled totally perfect enlightenment. 2. Inconceivable skill and liberative technique. At that time, there lived in the great city of Vaisali a certain Lakavi, Vimalakirti by name. Having served the ancient Buddhas, he had generated the roots of virtue by honoring them and making offerings to them. He had attained tolerance as well as eloquence. He played with the great superknowledges. He had attained the power of incantations and of fearlessnesses. He had conquered all demons and opponents. He had penetrated the profound way of the Dharma. He was liberated through the transcendence of wisdom. Having integrated his realization with skill and liberative technique, he was expert in knowing the thoughts and actions of living beings. Knowing the strength or weakness of their faculties, and being gifted with unrivaled eloquence, he taught the Dharma appropriately to each. Having applied himself energetically to the Mahayana, he understood it and accomplished his tasks with great finesse. He lived with the deportment of a Buddha, and his superior intelligence was as wide as an ocean. He was praised, honored, and commended by all the Buddhas, and was respected by Indra, Brahma, and all the Lokapalas. In order to develop living beings with his skill and liberative technique, he lived in the great city of Vaisali. His wealth was inexhaustible for the purpose of sustaining the poor and the helpless. He observed a pure morality in order to protect the immoral. He maintained tolerance and self-control in order to reconcile beings who were angry, cruel, violent, and brutal. He blazed with energy in order to inspire people who were lazy. He maintained concentration, mindfulness, and meditation in order to sustain the mentally troubled. He attained decisive wisdom in order to sustain the foolish. He wore the white clothes of the layman, yet lived impeccably like a religious devotee. He lived at home, but remained aloof from the realm of desire, the realm of pure matter, and the immaterial realm. He had a son, a wife, and female attendants, yet always maintained continence. He appeared to be surrounded by servants, yet lived in solitude. He appeared to be adorned with ornaments, yet always was endowed with the auspicious signs and marks. He seemed to eat and drink, yet always took nourishment from the taste of meditation. He made his appearance at the fields of sports and in the casinos, but his aim was always to mature those people who were attached to games and gambling. He visited the fashionable heterodox teachers, yet always kept unswerving loyalty to the Buddha. He understood the mundane and transcendental sciences and esoteric practices, yet always took pleasure in the delights of the Dharma. He mixed in all crowds, yet was respected as foremost of all. In order to be in harmony with people, he associated with elders, with those of middle age, and with the young, yet always spoke in harmony with the Dharma. He engaged in all sorts of businesses, yet had no interest in profit or possessions. To train living beings, he would appear at crossroads and on street corners, and to protect them he participated in government. To turn people away from the Hinayana and to engage them in the Mahayana, he appeared among listeners and teachers of the Dharma. To develop children, he visited all the schools. To demonstrate the evils of desire, he even entered the brothels. To establish drunkards in correct mindfulness, he entered all the cabarets. He was honored as the businessman among businessmen because he demonstrated the priority of the Dharma. He was honored as the landlord among landlords because he renounced the aggressiveness of ownership. He was honored as the warrior among warriors because he cultivated endurance, determination, and fortitude. He was honored as the aristocrat among aristocrats because he suppressed pride, vanity, and arrogance. He was honored as the official among officials because he regulated the functions of government according to the Dharma. He was honored as the prince of princes because he reversed their attachment to royal pleasures and sovereign power. He was honored as a eunuch in the royal harem because he taught the young ladies according to the Dharma. He was compatible with ordinary people because he appreciated the excellence of ordinary merits. He was honored as the Indra among Indras because he showed them the temporality of their lordship. He was honored as the Brahma among Brahmas because he showed them the special excellence of gnosis. He was honored as the Lokapala among Lokapalas because he fostered the development of all living beings. Thus lived the Lakavi Vimalakirti in the great city of Vaisali, endowed with an infinite knowledge of skill and liberative techniques. At that time, out of this very skill and liberative technique, Vimalakirti manifested himself as if sick. To inquire after his health, the king, the officials, the lords, the youths, the aristocrats, the householders, the businessmen, the townfolk, the country folk, and thousands of other living beings came forth from the great city of Vaisali and called on the invalid. When they arrived, Vimalakirti taught them the Dharma, beginning his discourse from the actuality of the four main elements. Friends, this body is so impermanent, fragile, unworthy of confidence, and feeble. It is so insubstantial, perishable, short-lived, painful, filled with diseases, and subject to changes. Thus, my friends, as this body is only a vessel of many sicknesses, wise men do not rely on it. This body is like a ball of foam, unable to bear any pressure. It is like a water bubble, not remaining very long. It is like a mirage, born from the appetites of the passions. It is like the trunk of the plantain tree, having no core. Alas! This body is like a machine, a nexus of bones and tendons. It is like a magical illusion, consisting of falsifications. It is like a dream, being an unreal vision. It is like a reflection, being the image of former actions. It is like an echo, being dependent on conditioning. It is like a cloud, being characterized by turbulence and dissolution. It is like a flash of lightning, being unstable and decaying every moment. The body is ownerless, being the product of a variety of conditions. This body is inert, like the earth, selfless, like water, lifeless, like fire, impersonal, like the wind, and non-substantial, like space. This body is unreal, being a collocation of the four main elements. It is void, not existing as self or as self-possessed. It is inanimate, being like grass, trees, walls, clods of earth, and hallucinations. It is insensate, being driven like a windmill. It is filthy, being an agglomeration of pus and excrement. It is false, being fated to be broken and destroyed, in spite of being anointed and massaged. It is afflicted by the 404 diseases. It is like an ancient well, constantly overwhelmed by old age. Its duration is never certain only as its end in death. This body is a combination of aggregates, elements, and sense media, which are comparable to murderers, poisonous snakes, and an empty town, respectively. Therefore, you should be revulsed by such a body. You should despair of it and should arouse your admiration for the body of the Tathagata. Friends, the body of a Tathagata is the body of Dharma, born of gnosis. The body of a Tathagata is born of the stores of merit and wisdom. It is born of morality, of meditation, of wisdom, of the liberations, and of the knowledge and vision of liberation. It is born of love, compassion, joy, and impartiality. It is born of charity, discipline, and self-control. It is born of the path of 10 virtues. It is born of patience and gentleness. It is born of the roots of virtue planted by solid efforts. It is born of the concentrations, the liberations, the meditations, and the absorptions. It is born of learning, wisdom, and liberative technique. It is born of the 37 aids to enlightenment. It is born of mental quiescence and transcendental analysis. It is born of the 10 powers, the 4 fearlessnesses, and the 18 special qualities. It is born of all the transcendences. It is born from sciences and superknowledges. It is born of the abandonment of all evil qualities, and of the collection of all good qualities. It is born of truth. It is born of reality. It is born of conscious awareness. Friends, the body of a Tathagata is born of innumerable good works. Towards such a body you should turn your aspirations, and, in order to eliminate the sicknesses of the passions of all living beings, You should conceive the spirit of unexcelled perfect enlightenment. While the Lakavi Vimalakirti thus taught the Dharma to those who had come to inquire about his sickness, many hundreds of thousands of living beings conceived the spirit of unexcelled perfect enlightenment. 3. The disciples' reluctance to visit Vimalakirti. Then, the Lakavi Vimalakirti thought to himself, I am sick, lying on my bed in pain, yet the Tathagata, the saint, the perfectly accomplished Buddha, does not consider or take pity upon me, and sends no one to inquire after my illness. The Lord knew this thought in the mind of Vimalakirti and said to the Venerable Sariputra, Sariputra, go to inquire after the illness of the Lakavi Vimalakirti. Thus having been addressed, the Venerable Sariputra answered the Buddha, Lord, I am indeed reluctant to go to ask the Lakavi Vimalakirti about his illness. Why? I remember one day, when I was sitting at the foot of a tree in the forest, absorbed in contemplation, the Lakavi Vimalakirti came to the foot of that tree and said to me, Reverend Sariputra, this is not the way to absorb yourself in contemplation. You should absorb yourself in contemplation so that neither body nor mind appear anywhere in the triple world. You should absorb yourself in contemplation in such a way that you can manifest all ordinary behavior without forsaking cessation. You should absorb yourself in contemplation in such a way that you can manifest the nature of an ordinary person without abandoning your cultivated spiritual nature. You should absorb yourself in contemplation so that the mind neither settles within nor moves without toward external forms. You should absorb yourself in contemplation in such a way that the 37 aids to enlightenment are manifest without deviation toward any convictions. You should absorb yourself in contemplation in such a way that you are released in liberation, without abandoning the passions that are the province of the world. Reverend Sariputra, those who absorb themselves in contemplation in such a way are declared by the Lord to be truly absorbed in contemplation. Lord, when I heard this teaching, I was unable to reply and remained silent. Therefore, I am reluctant to go to ask that good man about his sickness. Then, the Buddha said to the Venerable Mahajalayana, go to the Lakavi Vimalakirti to inquire about his illness. Mahajalayana replied, Lord, I am indeed reluctant to go to the Lakavi Vimalakirti to inquire about his illness. Why? I remember one day when I was teaching the Dharma to the householders in a square in the great city of Visali, and the Lakavi Vimalakirti came along and said to me, Reverend Mahajalayana, that is not the way to teach the Dharma to the householders in their white clothes. The Dharma must be taught according to reality. Reverend Mahajalayana, the Dharma is without living beings, because it is free of the dust of living beings. It is selfless, because it is free of the dust of desire. It is lifeless, because it is free of birth and death. It is without personalities, because it dispenses with past origins and future destinies. The Dharma is peace and pacification, because it is free from desire. It does not become an object, because it is free of words and letters. It is inexpressible, and it transcends all movement of mind. The Dharma is omnipresent, because it is like infinite space. It is without color, mark, or shape, because it is free of all process. It is without the concept of mine, because it is free of the habitual notion of possession. It is without ideation, because it is free of mind, thought, or consciousness. It is incomparable, because it has no antitheses. It is without presumption of conditionality, because it does not conform to causes. It permeates evenly all things, because all are included in the ultimate realm. It conforms to reality by means of the process of nonconformity. It abides at the reality limit, for it is utterly without fluctuation. It is immovable, because it is independent of the 6 objects of sense. It is without coming and going, for it never stands still. It is comprised by voidness, is remarkable through signlessness, and is free of presumption and repudiation, because of wishlessness. It is without establishment and rejection, without birth or destruction. It is without any fundamental consciousness, transcending the range of eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and thought. It is without highness and lowness. It abides without movement or activity. Reverend Mahajalayana, how could there be a teaching in regard to such a Dharma? Reverend Mahamajalayana, even the expression to teach the Dharma is presumptuous, and those who listen to it listen to presumption. Reverend Mahajalayana, where there are no presumptuous words, there is no teacher of the Dharma, no one to listen, and no one to understand. It is as if an illusory person were to teach the Dharma to illusory people. Therefore, you should teach the Dharma by keeping your mind on this. You should be adept in regard to the spiritual faculties of living beings. By means of the correct vision of the wisdom eye, manifesting the great compassion, acknowledging the benevolent activity of the Buddha, purifying your intentions, understanding the definitive expressions of the Dharma, you should teach the Dharma in order that the continuity of the three jewels may never be interrupted. Lord, when Vimalakirti had discoursed thus, 800 householders in the crowd conceived the spirit of unexcelled perfect enlightenment, and I myself was speechless. Therefore, Lord, I am indeed reluctant to go to this good man to inquire about his illness. Then, the Buddha said to the Venerable Mahakasyapa, Mahakasyapa, you go to the Lakavi Vimalakirti to inquire about his illness. Lord, I am indeed reluctant to go to the Lakavi Vimalakirti to inquire about his illness. Why? I remember one day, when I was in the street of the poor begging for my food, the Lakavi Vimalakirti came along and said to me, Reverend Mahakasyapa, to avoid the houses of the wealthy, and to favor the houses of the poor, this is partiality in benevolence. Reverend Mahakasyapa, you should dwell on the fact of the equality of things, and you should seek alms with consideration for all living beings at all times. You should beg your food in awareness of the ultimate non-existence of food. You should seek alms for the sake of eliminating the materialism of others. When you enter a town, you should keep in mind its actual voidness, yet you should proceed through it in order to develop men and women. You should enter homes as if entering the family of the Buddha. You should accept alms by not taking anything. You should see form like a man blind from birth, hear sounds as if they were echoes, smell scents as if they were winds, experience tastes without any discrimination, touch tangibles in awareness of the ultimate lack of contact and gnosis, and know things with the consciousness of an illusory creature. That which is without intrinsic substance and without imparted substance does not burn. And what does not burn will not be extinguished. Elder Mahakasyapa, if equipoised in the 8 liberations without transcending the 8 perversions, you can enter the equanimity of reality by means of the equanimity of perversion, and if you can make a gift to all living beings, and an offering to all the saints and Buddhas out of even a single measure of alms, then you yourself may eat. Thus, when you eat, after offering, you should be neither affected by passions nor free of passions, neither involved in concentration nor free from concentration, neither living in the world nor abiding in liberation. Furthermore, those who give such alms, Reverend, have neither great merit nor small merit, neither gain nor loss. They should follow the way of the Buddhas, not the way of the disciples. Only in this way, Elder Mahakasyapa, is the practice of eating by alms meaningful. Lord, when I heard this teaching, I was astonished and thought, reverence to all bodhisattvas. If a lay bodhisattva may be endowed with such eloquence, who is there who would not conceive the spirit of unexcelled perfect enlightenment? From that time forth, I no longer recommend the vehicles of the disciples and of the solitary sages, but recommend the Mahayana. And thus, Lord, I am reluctant to go to this good man to inquire about his illness. Then, the Buddha said to the Venerable Subhuti, Subhuti, go to the Lakavi Vimalakirti to inquire about his illness. Subhuti replied, Lord, I am indeed reluctant to go to this good man to inquire about his illness. Why? My Lord, I remember one day, when I went to beg my food at the house of the Lakavi Vimalakirti in the great city of the Sali, he took my bowl and filled it with some excellent food and said to me, Reverend Subhuti, take this food if you understand the equality of all things, by means of the equality of material objects, and if you understand the equality of all the attributes of the Buddha, by means of the equality of all things. Take this food if, without abandoning desire, hatred, and folly, you can avoid association with them, if you can follow the path of the single way without ever disturbing the egoistic views, if you can produce the knowledges and liberations without conquering ignorance and the craving for existence, if, by the equality of the 5 deadly sins, you reach the equality of liberation, if you are neither liberated nor bound, if you do not see the 4 holy truths, yet are not the one who has not seen the truth, if you have not attained any fruit, yet are not the one who has not attained, if you are an ordinary person, yet have not the qualities of an ordinary person, if you are not holy, yet are not unholy, if you are responsible for all things, yet are free of any notion concerning anything. Take this food, reverend Subhuti, if, without seeing the Buddha, hearing the Dharma, or serving the Sangha, you undertake the religious life under the 6 heterodox masters, namely, Purana Kasyapa, Maskaringa Saliputra, Samjayan Varadaputra, Kakuta Katyayana, Ajita Kasakambala, and Nirgrantha Jnanaputra, and follow the ways they prescribe. Take this food, reverend Subhuti, if, entertaining all false views, you find neither extremes nor middle, if, bound up in the 8 adversities, you do not obtain favorable conditions, if, assimilating the passions, you do not attain purification, if the dispassion of all living beings is your dispassion, reverend, if those who make offerings to you are not thereby purified, if those who offer you food, reverend, still fall into the 3 bad migrations, if you associate with all maras, if you entertain all passions, if the nature of passions is the nature of a reverend, if you have hostile feelings toward all living beings, if you despise all the Buddhas, if you criticize all the teachings of the Buddha, if you do not rely on the Sangha, and finally, if you never enter ultimate liberation. Lord, when I heard these words of the Lakavi Vimalakirti, I wondered what I should say and what I should do, but I was totally in the dark. Leaving the bowl, I was about to leave the house when the Lakavi Vimalakirti said to me, Reverend Subhuti, do not fear these words, and pick up your bowl. What do you think, Reverend Subhuti? If it were an incarnation created by the Tathagata who spoke thus to you, would you be afraid? I answered, no indeed, noble sir. He then said, Reverend Subhuti, the nature of all things is like illusion, like a magical incarnation. So you should not fear them. Why? All words also have that nature, and thus the wise are not attached to words, nor do they fear them. Why? All language does not ultimately exist, except as liberation. The nature of all things is liberation. When Vimalakirti had discoursed in this way, 200 gods obtained the pure doctrinal vision in regard to all things, without obscurity or defilement, and 500 gods obtained a conformative tolerance. As for me, I was speechless and unable to respond to him. Therefore, Lord, I am reluctant to go to this good man to inquire about his illness. Then, the Buddha said to the Venerable Purnamaitrayanaputra, Purna, go to the Lakavi Vimalakirti to inquire about his illness. Purna replied, Lord, I am indeed reluctant to go to this good man to inquire about his illness. Why? Lord, I remember one day, when I was teaching the Dharma to some young monks in the great forest, the Lakavi Vimalakirti came there and said to me, Reverend Purna, first concentrate yourself, regard the minds of these young bhikshus, and then teach them the Dharma. Do not put rotten food into a jeweled bowl. First understand the inclinations of these monks, and do not confuse priceless sapphires with glass beads. Reverend Purna, without examining the spiritual faculties of living beings, do not presume upon the one-sidedness of their faculties, do not wound those who are without wounds, do not impose a narrow path upon those who aspire to a great path, do not try to pour the great ocean into the hoofprint of an ox, do not try to put Mount Sumeru into a grain of mustard. Do not confuse the brilliance of the sun with the light of a glowworm, and do not expose those who admire the roar of a lion to the howl of a jackal. Reverend Purna, all these monks were formerly engaged in the Mahayana, but have forgotten the spirit of enlightenment. So do not instruct them in the disciple vehicle. The disciple vehicle is not ultimately valid, and you disciples are like men blind from birth, in regard to recognition of the degrees of the spiritual faculties of living beings. At that moment, the Lakavi Vimalakirti entered into such a concentration that those Monks were caused to remember their various former existences, in which they had produced the roots of virtue by serving 500 Buddhas for the sake of perfect enlightenment. As soon as their own spirits of enlightenment had become clear to them, they bowed at the feet of that good man and pressed their palms together in reverence. He taught them the Dharma, and they all attained the stage of irreversibility from the spirit of unexcelled perfect enlightenment. It occurred to me then, the disciples, who do not know the thoughts or the inclinations of others, are not able to teach the Dharma to anyone. Why? These disciples are not expert in discerning the superiority and inferiority of the spiritual faculties of living beings, and they are not always in a state of concentration like the Tathagata, the saint, the perfectly accomplished Buddha. Therefore, Lord, I am reluctant to go to that good man to inquire about his health. The Buddha then said to the Venerable Mahakatyayana, Katyayana, go to the Lakavi Vimalakirti to inquire about his illness. Katyayana replied, Lord, I am indeed reluctant to go that good man to inquire about his illness. Why? Lord, I remember one day when, after the Lord had given some brief instruction to the monks, I was defining the expressions of that discourse by teaching the meaning of impermanence, suffering, selflessness, and peace. The Lakavi Vimalakirti came there and said to me, Reverend Mahakatyayana, do not teach an ultimate reality endowed with activity, production, and destruction. Reverend Mahakatyayana, nothing was ever destroyed, is destroyed, or will ever be destroyed. Such is the meaning of impermanence. The meaning of the realization of birthlessness, through the realization of the voidness of the five aggregates, is the meaning of suffering. The fact of the non-duality of self and selflessness is the meaning of selflessness. That which has no intrinsic substance and no other sort of substance does not burn, and what does not burn is not extinguished. Such lack of extinction is the meaning of peace. When he had discoursed thus, the minds of the monks were liberated from their defilements and entered a state of non-grasping. Therefore, Lord, I am reluctant to go to that good man to inquire about his illness. The Buddha then said to the Venerable Anuruddha, Anuruddha, go to the Lakavi Vimalakirti to inquire about his illness. My Lord, I am indeed reluctant to go that good man to inquire about his illness. Why? I remember, Lord, one day when I was taking a walk, the great Brahma named Subhavyuha, and the 10,000 other Brahmas who accompanied him illuminated the place with their radiance and, having bowed their heads at my feet, withdrew to one side and asked me, Reverend Anuruddha, you have been proclaimed by the Buddha to be the foremost among those who possess the divine eye. To what distance does the divine vision of the Venerable Anuruddha extend? I answered, friends, I see the entire billion-world galactic universe of the Lord Sakyamuni, just as plainly as a man of ordinary vision sees a Mirabala nut on the palm of his hand. When I had said these words, the Lakavi Vimalakirti came there and, having bowed his head at my feet, said to me, Reverend Anuruddha, is your divine eye compounded in nature? Or is it uncompounded in nature? If it is compounded in nature, it is the same as the super-knowledges of the heterodox. If it is uncompounded in nature, then it is not constructed and, as such, is incapable of seeing. Then, how do you see, O elder? At these words, I became speechless, and Brahma also was amazed to hear this teaching from that good man. Having bowed to him, he said, who then, in the world, possesses the divine eye? Vimalakirti answered, in the world, it is the Buddhas who have the divine eye. They see all the Buddha fields without even leaving their state of concentration, and without being affected by duality. Having heard these words, the 10,000 Brahmas were inspired with high resolve, and conceived the spirit of unexcelled perfect enlightenment. Having paid homage and respect both to me and to that good man, they disappeared. As for me, I remained speechless, and therefore I am reluctant to go to that good man to inquire about his illness. The Buddha then said to the Venerable Upali, Upali, go to the Lakavi Vimalakirti to inquire about his illness. Upali replied, Lord, I am indeed reluctant to go to that good man to inquire about his illness. Why? Lord, I remember that one day there were 2 monks who had committed some infraction and were too ashamed to appear before the Lord, so they came to me and said, Reverend Upali, We have both committed an infraction, but are too ashamed. Lord, while I was giving those two monks some religious discourse, the Lakavi Vimalakirti came there and said to me, Reverend Upali, do not aggravate further the sins of these two monks. Without perplexing them, relieve their remorse. Reverend Upali, sin is not to be apprehended within, or without, or between the two. Why? The Buddha has said, living beings are afflicted by the passions of thought, and they are purified by the purification of thought. Reverend Upali, the mind is neither within nor without, nor is it to be apprehended. Between the two, sin is just the same as the mind, and all things are just the same as sin. They do not escape the same reality. Reverend Upali, this nature of the mind, by virtue of which your mind, Reverend, is liberated, does it ever become afflicted? Never, I replied. Reverend Upali, the minds of all living beings have that very nature. Reverend Upali, passions consist of conceptualizations. The ultimate non-existence of these conceptualizations and imaginary fabrications, that is the purity that is the intrinsic nature of the mind. Misapprehensions are passions. The ultimate absence of misapprehensions is the intrinsic nature of the mind. The presumption of self is passion. The absence of self is the intrinsic nature of the mind. Reverend Upali, all things are without production, destruction, and duration, like magical illusions, clouds, and lightning. All things are evanescent, not remaining even for an instant. All things are like dreams, hallucinations, and unreal visions. All things are like the reflection of the moon in water and like a mirror image. They are born of mental construction. Those who know this are called the true upholders of the discipline, and those disciplined in that way are indeed well disciplined. Then the two monks said, this householder is extremely well endowed with wisdom. The Reverend Upali, who is proclaimed by the Lord as the foremost of the upholders of the discipline, is not his equal. I then said to the two monks, do not entertain the notion that he is a mere householder. Why? With the exception of the Tathagata himself, there is no disciple or bodhisattva capable of competing with his eloquence or rivaling the brilliance of his wisdom. Thereupon, the two monks, delivered from their anxieties and inspired with a high resolve, conceived the spirit of unexcelled perfect enlightenment. Bowing down to that good man, they made the wish, may all living beings attain eloquence such as this. Therefore, I am reluctant to go to that good man to inquire about his illness. The Buddha then said to the Venerable Rahula, Rahula, go to the Lakavi Vimalakirti to inquire about his illness. Rahula replied, Lord, I am indeed reluctant to go to that good man to inquire about his illness. Why? Lord, I remember that one day many young Lakavi gentlemen came to the place where I was and said to me, Reverend Rahula, you are the son of the Lord, and, having renounced a kingdom of a universal monarch, you have left the world. What are the virtues and benefits you saw in leaving the world? As I was teaching them properly the benefits and virtues of renouncing the world, the Lakavi Vimalakirti came there and, having greeted me, said, Reverend Rahula, you should not teach the benefits and virtues of renunciation in the way that you do. Why? Renunciation is itself the very absence of virtues and benefits. Reverend Rahula, one may speak of benefits and virtues in regard to compounded things, but renunciation is uncompounded, and there can be no question of benefits and virtues in regard to the uncompounded. Reverend Rahula, renunciation is not material but is free of matter. It is free of the extreme views of beginning and end. It is the path of liberation. It is praised by the wise, embraced by the saints, and causes the defeat of all maras. It liberates from the 5 states of existence, purifies the 5 eyes, cultivates the 5 powers, and supports the 5 spiritual faculties. Renunciation is totally harmless to others and is not adulterated with evil things. It disciplines the heterodox, transcending all denominations. It is the bridge over the swamp of desire, without grasping, and free of the habits of I and mine. It is without attachment and without disturbance, eliminating all commotion. It disciplines one's own mind and protects the minds of others. It favors mental quiescence and stimulates transcendental analysis. It is irreproachable in all respects. And so is called renunciation. Those who leave the mundane in this way are called truly renunciant. Young men, renounce the world in the light of this clear teaching. The appearance of the Buddha is extremely rare. Human life endowed with leisure and opportunity is very hard to obtain. To be a human being is very precious. The young men complained. But, householder, we have heard the Tathagata declare that one should not renounce the world without the permission of one's parents. Vimalakirti answered. Young men, you should cultivate yourselves intensively to conceive the spirit of unexcelled perfect enlightenment. That in itself will be your renunciation and high ordination. Thereupon, 32 of the Lakavi youths conceived the spirit of unexcelled perfect enlightenment. Therefore, Lord, I am reluctant to go to that good man to inquire about his illness. The Buddha then said to the Venerable Ananda, Ananda, go to the Lakavi Vimalakirti to inquire about his illness. Ananda replied, Lord, I am indeed reluctant to go to that good man to inquire about his illness. Why? Lord, I remember one day when the body of the Lord manifested some indisposition and he required some milk. I took the bowl and went to the door of the mansion of a great Brahmin family. The Lakavi Vimalakirti came there, and, having saluted me, said, Reverend Ananda, what are you doing on the threshold of this house with your bowl in your hand so early in the morning? I replied, the body of the Lord manifests some indisposition, and he needs some milk. Therefore, I have come to fetch some. Vimalakirti then said to me, Reverend Ananda, do not say such a thing. Reverend Ananda, the body of the Tathagata is tough as a diamond, having eliminated all the instinctual traces of evil, and being endowed with all goodness. How could disease or discomfort affect such a body? Reverend Ananda, go in silence, and do not belittle the Lord. Do not say such things to others. It would not be good for the powerful gods or for the bodhisattvas coming from the various Buddha fields to hear such words. Reverend Ananda, a universal monarch, who is endowed only with a small root of virtue, is free of diseases. How then could the Lord, who has an infinite root of virtue, have any disease? It is impossible. Reverend Ananda, do not bring shame upon us, but go in silence, lest the heterodox sectarians should hear your words. They would say, for shame. The teacher of these people cannot even cure his own sicknesses. How then can he cure the sicknesses of others? Reverend Ananda, go then discreetly so that no one observes you. Reverend Ananda, the Tathagatas have the body of the Dharma, not a body that is sustained by material food. The Tathagatas have a transcendental body that has transcended all mundane qualities. There is no injury to the body of a Tathagata, as it is rid of all defilements. The body of a Tathagata is uncompounded and free of all formative activity. Reverend Ananda, to believe there can be illness in such a body is irrational and unseemly. When I had heard these words, I wondered if I had previously misheard and misunderstood the Buddha, and I was very much ashamed. Then I heard a voice from the sky. Ananda, the householder speaks to you truly. Nevertheless, since the Buddha has appeared during the time of the 5 corruptions, he disciplines living beings by acting lowly and humble. Therefore, Ananda, do not be ashamed, and go and get the milk. Lord, such was my conversation with the Lakavi Vimalakirti, and therefore I am reluctant to go to that good man to inquire about his illness. In the same way, the rest of the 500 disciples were reluctant to go to the Lakavi Vimalakirti, and each told the Buddha his own adventure, recounting all his conversations with the Lakavi Vimalakirti. Thank you for tuning in. This concludes our current video. We invite you to continue your journey by watching the next episode of the Vimalakirti Nirdesa Sutra. Your support through likes, shares, and subscriptions is instrumental in spreading the profound teachings of Buddha to a broader audience. As a reminder, you can find the complete video playlist in the video description, ensuring easy access to the entire series. Together, we can illuminate the path to wisdom and enlightenment for all. Thank you for your dedication to the Buddha's teachings.